So, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here with us this afternoon. And for some persons, it may be morning, but good afternoon to everybody. I just wish to say thank you so much. Our title for today is Bridging the Divide, an insightful discussion with panelists who successfully integrated theory and practice within academia and for the purpose of workforce training and professional development. My name is Yvonne Hunter, and I am an associate professor within the Department of Organizational Learning, Innovation and Development at Southern Illinois University in Carbondale. And I will serve as the moderator for this webinar. But before we delve into our webinar, I just want to just have give you some insight as it relates to the flow of this webinar. The webinar is proposed to be for 1 hour. We would have 45 minutes with our panelists and then 15 minutes with our for question and answers. And we'll also have a link for helpful resources and the bios for our panelists who are serving on this webinar. Our first panelist is Dr. Misawa, and he is an associate professor, and he is responsible for the Master's and PhD and Master's and PhD Adult and Continuing Education Program Director at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, within the Department of Educational Leadership and Policy Studies. Thank you so much and welcome, Dr. Misawa. Our second panelist is Matt Ramirez. And Matt Ramirez is a consultant at KPMG, Human Capital Advisory in Tampa, Florida. And I also want to say that he's a graduate from University of South Florida, Go Bulls, my academic brother. And he is the former director of this great commission. Welcome, Matt. Our third panelist is Dr. Eggleston. She's the owner and principal consultant at Alpha Best Consulting, LLC, in Charlotte, North Carolina. Dr. Eggleston is also a former president of AAACE, as well as a former commission director for this great commission. Welcome, Dr. Eggleston. So, bridging the divide. So welcome once again, Dr. Mitsuwa, and let's begin the webinar with you. So as a scholar, you investigated learning theories and social cultural concepts to better understand ways in which adult and higher education institutions can more effectively serve diverse populations in contemporary society. Please share with us how your research informs training and professional development for the workforce. Dr. Miswa?
Thank you, Dr. Hunter. You asked me a great question, actually. I've been thinking about this for a while, but when I reflect on my own teaching and training experiences, I just realized that, I've been in teaching higher education for 24 years. So it's almost a quarter century. It was very surprising to me. So one of my first teaching was an undergraduate course on Asian language and culture. So that was about 2000. So, when I think about that, I was kind of, what do you call it? So anyway, so the course was actually an evening course where many working adults came to the class after the work. So that was my first exposure to adult learners in higher education setting. And then since then, I've been teaching in graduate programs, both master's and PhD in adult and continuing education. And then I have focused on social justice, positionality, ethics, and professionalism, including adult bullying at work. In the past 15 years. As an adult educator, I have consistently prioritized the integration of theory and practice and sometimes we call theory in practice. It's difficult, I think. But nowadays, people start realizing how important it is for us or for our learners to be able to apply what they learn in class to their own lives and practices. So I live in Tennessee. We focus kind of on workforce development from state perspective, but sometimes there are many jobs, but people are not able to get it because they don't have enough skills to do it. I think that workforce development and adult education come in to help, you know, our Tennesseans or maybe people surround Tennessee to be able to have the job and the skill because we have more jobs than actually people working for. So anyway, so to me, theory in practice is an important part of our education for adults, for sure. And one of the things that I emphasize is to use I mean, adults, adult learners' prior knowledge and life experiences when they read journal articles, books, and book chapters for the class. So as you know, probably, right? I mean, we are all workforce developer and a workforce educator and adult educator. So as you know, adults have their own life experiences that are great learning resources. So from that perspective, I usually assign an autoethnographic writing assignment about their own cultures. So in order for them to grow as a scholars and practitioners, they need to know who they are first, and then how they how their own cultures shape who they are today. So I think that autoethnographic approach is very, very important to me from the social justice perspective as well. Additionally, I also focus on action-centered education, and people can say like maybe action research for research course or action learning in a learning theory courses, I think. But in any situation in academia and workplaces, we always look for betterment and continuing improvement. And sometimes we kind of focus too much on performance improvement, but sometimes, it's important for us to, understand that what we are doing currently to identify possible issues and problems. But sometimes we don't do that. We just focus on the outcome and outcome. It doesn't work that way. So from that action-centered or action-oriented education, I kind of focus on from observations to reflection, to action, to evaluation, to modification. So to me, an action-oriented approach allows us to go from theory into practice. So that is kind of based on higher education perspective. At the same time, in a higher education, I was a faculty and a staff development trainer. Sorry. In addition to the role of faculty, I was also a faculty and staff development and training director at a state-operated psychiatric institution for a while after I completed my PhD from the University of Georgia. And then I'm also still involved in some of the staff development and the workforce development for the particular psychiatric institution. But at the same time, I'm also involved in a faculty and staff development at my current institution. So as professionals, so we don't talk much about our own positionality or our own social cultural markers. But however, our positionality matters and impacts how we work together as a group. At the professional development and workforce development settings, I usually bring my own positionality to demystify how our power dynamics shape our community, including workplaces. So that case, I use a narrative approach to share my own experiences as a gay man of color at the work or in higher education. And it's been working for me well, I think. Sharing stories, sometimes difficult, but from the facilitator's perspective, when they start sharing, then people start listening. I think that active listening components of narrative approach is very, very important and very, very effective from my experiences. And then I also work with human resources in this particular institution to develop and implement a campus-wide anti-bullying policy at my current institution. So I use my own theoretical and empirical knowledge to help develop the anti-bullying policy, which was widely disseminated and widely used in our campus at this point in time. I also conducted workshops and training sessions for various departments on that particular policy because it was new to our campus. And I don't think that there are many universities have that particular policy. So, I think this is one of the first one in our system. So people kind of excited about it. At the same time, people kind of scared about it a little bit. And then when I do that, and I use my narrative approach and action-oriented education to discuss some case examples of workplace bullying because it is often difficult for people to know, and it's typically associated with childhood malbehavior that will magically disappear when they become adults. It doesn't work that way, right? So bullying continues sometimes, especially for the workplaces. There are many incidents happening, in a workforce for sure. And then it's important for me to kind of take a look at, the bullying perspective, like it continues and it impacts both target and victims. And sometimes it impacts survivors too, right? So once you become victims or target of bullying, you're basically becoming survivors and you have to learn how to navigate the workforce and work environment. So I continuously use my theoretical perspectives into my own practice like that. And I also ask my adult learners to do the same thing. Try to apply something you learned from the class into their own practice. Yeah. So I think I've been successful, but I think that it's a lifelong learning process for me. So, Dr. Hunter, I would like to stop here now.
Thank you so much, Dr. Misowa, for sharing those examples of how theory and practice can converge and in a collaborative manner provide the impetus for workforce and professional development. So thank you so much for that great response. Good afternoon, Dr. Ramirez, and welcome to the webinar. You certainly traverse an interesting path, having started out as a high school teacher. As a learning professional and consultant with over 30 years of experience in the field of training and development, please share with us how you have integrated theory and practice for designing and delivering courses.
Yes.
Dr. Ramirez?
Thanks. Thank you, Dr. Hunter. It feels very formal to call you Dr. Hunter, so I will struggle with that a little bit. I've known Yvonne for a very long time, so very happy to be here today. Thank you, by the way, for inviting me. Really excited to be back. As Yvonne mentioned at the start of the session, I was chair for this committee up until I want to say, Yvonne, when did I when did I pass the buck to
I
you? Was
think
it?
you passed it 2 years ago.
Yes, yeah, it
Yes.
sounds about right. So glad to see still alive, still doing well. Lots of new faces, but very much excited to be back and chatting with everyone today. Dr. Hunter brought up an interesting point. I started my professional life out as a high school history teacher here in Tampa, Florida, and had the opportunity after a couple years here to work overseas on what's called JET, the Japanese Exchange and Teaching Program. I taught at a high school in Saitama Prefecture for about 3 years, and when I returned back to the United States, it's an awkward period when you come back from JET. You come back in July, and this was in the late 90s, back before the internet, back before there was this teacher shortage. So as I was struggling to really find a job teaching again, I wound up working at a homeless shelter, helping folks helping folks who are transitioning back into a home environment, into a work environment, understand how to use if you all remember how to use Windows 98, which was something of a
Mhm.
learning curve for any of us who didn't know what Windows was or a computer in the late 90s. And that turned into something outside of teaching in high school, but teaching adults, which was a wonderful transition for me. That turned into a career for me now at a few different places. If you're familiar with what the industry we call the Big Four accounting firms, I've been at two of them. I'm currently at KPMG. Along the way, I've worked for a very large bank. You can always look me up on LinkedIn if you want to know more. A very large hotel conglomerate, global hotel conglomerate. But I've wound up here and really love what I'm doing. Um, just very fortunate that I have a wonderful client. I've been working with them for about 2.5 years in the state of Florida. It's the Florida Division of Emergency Management. I was on with them right before I jumped on this call because we are prepping here for a hurricane, tropical storm now, potentially hurricane very shortly. And I do training for them. Right now, we have covered, there's 67 counties in Florida, and my team and I have blanketed the state, hit all 67 counties, delivering content on their behalf. I do not have a background in emergency management. As Yvonne mentioned, I have a degree, undergrad in social science education, a master's in adult education, a PhD in adult education. But along the way, I have become an expert on things like human trafficking, leadership, emergency management, um, bank fraud, and it's just something you do in the corporate world. As you're building out content, you become an expert on it. So I don't really have an area of expertise per se, other than training and how adults learn, which is I think going back to the question maybe that Yvonne started with, which was, where's that connection, right? Where's learning and training and the corporate environment all come together? And it's just that, it's understanding that no matter where I am in the world, no matter where I am with my client or the folks that I'm working with, if I understand how adults learn, how they take on information. I really like Dr. Masawa's comment about being an action oriented, having an action oriented approach. That if we can help adults understand how to get from point A to point B, and point B is an action, then I believe that we've done our job. So I think I can pause there, Dr. Hunter, and turn it back over to you.
Yes, thank you for sharing examples of bridging the divide from your experience, Dr. Ramirez. We are now more knowledgeable about opportunities of applying principles of adult learning in the corporate world. So let's move on to Dr. Eggleston. No, we did not forget you. Although your career was carried out in the federal government, I understand that as an academic, your theoretical focus was on adult learning and human resource development. Please share with us how you integrated theory into practice outside of academia and continue to do so today. Dr.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Hunter. And I've got to just say thank you, Yvonne. Okay, so
fine. Everyone here knows me as Yvonne. It's fine.
So thank you so much for inviting me to share from my perspective and my experiences as well. The amazing thing, first of all, I'd like to point out is how you are the latest and greatest director of CWPD. Matt, you were her predecessor, and I was your predecessor minus or plus one that came in between us. So this is really a great time for me to reconnect with everybody, and definitely looking forward to reconnecting to with our participants at the conference in October in Reno. So I'd like to ask that everybody bring an extra few dollars so that if I lose my little winnings at the beginning, you can help supplement me. I'm not ashamed to take loans. But it's truly a pleasure to be here. And in the same vein as Matt and Miss Sue, Dr. Masawa, I've come a long way with academia, and it's like in my blood. And that makes it kind of hard to transition between government, where I did my entire career, and academia, where I did teaching for 9 years in an online university, taught online for American Public University, American Military University, and I actually got to teach for a full semester at Virginia Tech, which is my alma mater. So, yeah, just to give you a little background there about how I came to the point of even knowing that I was bridging the divide. I did not know that. Truly, I thought there was the work world and then there was academia, and the two never met. We never spoke the same language. Being a government brat meant that I did rules, regulations, and all sorts of things like that. And then going into academia, working on my degree, I had to learn not to use citations and quotes from government, and actually look at theory and those who came before and laid the foundation for the work and the learning that I would be doing. That was a huge divide for me. Many of you know that in government, we don't particularly write for public consumption. We use a lot of words, a lot of jargon, and a lot of non-descriptive language. So you can never actually say, well, you said this, or you said we should do it this way. You won't find that except with the IRS. They're going to tell you exactly what you need to do, and you better do it, okay? So originally I started with US Postal Service. And when I was there, I was finishing up my bachelor's degree in criminal justice. I wanted to join the police department. I weighed about 90 pounds. I stand 5'1". Not your primary look for a police officer, okay? Not only that, I'm afraid of dark alleys. I'm afraid of guns. I'm afraid of people. I'm afraid of cars that have sirens on them, okay? So yeah, truly, it was a blessing for me to remain in academia and not join the police department, because I said, you know what? I can probably teach this stuff better than some of the people who were trying to teach me. I said, if they can do that, I can do that too. So that started my journey. And I said, I'll just work on getting my bachelor's, and still in government. Again, did my entire career in government. And the two just sort of merged together, because there are places in government that value degrees. Many people think that government does not value degrees. The National Science Foundation is one of the agencies that you can join with your degree and have an awesome job, an awesome retirement, and make a difference for the entire United States. Another place that you're very familiar with, I'm sure, is the Library of Congress. They definitely appreciate those who have scholarly degrees. Now, there are places in the government where maybe a degree doesn't mean much, but what I'd like to stress to you in bridging the divide is that scholars are needed in the federal government. I've also worked for state government in Michigan. Scholars are needed there as well. These are primary ways to bridge the divide. My adult learning and human resource development theories actually converged and enabled me to be successful as a business owner. I own a small business single-handedly. I am the principal consultant. I am the everything, the bookkeeper, the accountant. I am it. But it is so much fun because I get to pick and choose what I do, when I do it, and for whom. I currently have one client, and I've been with that client for 14 years. Similar to Matt, I help with course development and I deliver training. And that is so much fun. The hard part about blending in was the fact that I still wanted to use those citations, in-text citations, and I still wanted to have lists and lists of references. That doesn't look very well when you're doing PowerPoint presentations, okay? So that was something I had to unlearn. I had to detach from scholarly writing and delivery and reattach to just what my constituents could use. Primarily, it was non-scholarly material. So just want to share that. And I'm going to give it back to Dr. Hunter to see if Dr. Mitsuwa or Dr. Ramirez would like to chime in on anything before I ask for a second go, because I'm not done yet.
Dr. Ramirez or Dr. Mitsuwa, as instructed by Dr. Eggleston, would you like to chime in? And then she would wrap up. Would you like to add any additional comments to what she would have said? And then she can wrap up her section, her response.
Yeah, Dr. Masu, I'll defer to you if you have anything to say, and then I can go.
Please go ahead.
Okay, okay. Appreciate that. So so much of what Dr. Edelson has said rings very true to me. It feels like we have been down the same roads before together, maybe just at different times and different roads, but about the same sort of journey. And I, I think there's always that, and it's so great because the image has stayed up this whole time, this bridge that there is so much that I have learned from my adult education background that I apply daily with work that I do with all of my clients, with all the work that I've done over the last 27 or so years in the corporate environment, 26 years in the corporate environment. All of it has so much, it's very relative to what probably all of you do if you don't do exactly what we do as consultants. And then I think what we do is not all that dissimilar to you. It's just rather than potentially if you're in academia, you've got students and we've got clients, and you always have to meet the needs of the client. The client is the reason that I have a job and that I can afford to pay my rent and or our mortgage, and same for you. So keeping that in mind, understanding the needs, wants, and desires of my clients and the folks I'm delivering to, being thoughtful in our approach to how we develop content. There's always in the back of my mind, every time I bring on a new instructional designer to my team, I always want to tell them about Bloom's taxonomy. And then as soon as we talk about that, we put that aside and I say, just forget everything you learned. And it's okay to borrow other slide decks if you've seen better slide decks, or better images if you've seen images, because we do a lot of borrowing in the corporate world, so long as we're borrowing from our own content. But it's an interesting place because you don't have to worry about, as Dr. Eggleston said, you don't have to worry about citations. You just get the work done, do the best job you can. And I think similar to you, Dr. Eggleston, I have a good time doing it along the way. And if I didn't, I don't think I would have been doing this as long as I have.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ramirez. I think one thing that will stand out to all of our doctoral students who are on this webinar is that you can kindly or politely disregard that APA and references and citations. So I think that would be interesting for all our doctoral students. Thank you so much. Dr. Eggleston, you want to wrap up your response, please?
Yes, thank you so much. So similar to both of my colleagues here on the panel, I gained a lot of experience outside of academia, but what I learned in academia was always foundational to how I move forward in any of the tasks that I had with any clients that I had. And that was, as Dr. Ramirez mentioned, Bloom's taxonomy. That was the absolute best takeaway for helping me develop courses for my clients. It's like I know that I'm supposed to have a verb, an action word for each of my objectives, my course objectives, and things like that. There's so much we can take away, unlike when we're in high school and we're doing algebra classes and we never use it again. Anything that we take away in academia at these higher levels are definitely usable. A couple of recommendations that I have for those who may not go into teaching or instruction in a scholarly setting or institution. Consider, if you will, again, not only the federal government, but also consider perhaps starting your own business. On the very last slide that you will see, there is a link to an organization that I highly recommend. It is entitled SCORE, S-C-O-R-E, score.org. You'll see that on the very last slide. There are so many resources there if you want to consider entrepreneurship. Think about the fact that you can start your own business. You don't have to compete with the world now to get a job in academia, because the world is open due to the fact that most learning now consists of a component with an online setting. So you're competing with so many more instructors throughout the world for a single job. So are you going to just sit around and wait to be hired and hopefully get hired in academia? Absolutely not. Another recommendation that I have is to consider joining up with a nonprofit. You've got the foundational information and knowledge that you need from academia, but maybe you don't have real world experience. I highly recommend that you consider volunteerism. I have been a huge proponent of volunteerism. I have grown so much and been so informed by the way others work in the world, other industries. And so that's one of my recommendations, is to consider volunteerism to help further develop yourself. Even if you're still waiting on a teaching job, start volunteering. Be a passionate volunteer. Someone gave to you, give back. And a lot of the nonprofits are desperate for people who can generate reports, who can do analysis. And it will give you a good feeling to be able to give back. That's one of the things that I found. Now, I will tell you, between my love for academia and the fact that I still deliver presentations at conferences, I still do a little writing here and there, it's been a little difficult to totally do away with my APA manual. I'm just being honest. I update every version when they update it, okay? And I keep it right here at my right hand. Just because I value that, it does not mean other industries value knowing who said this in 1919, who came up with that, whose theory was that, what did they study, how did they study? They don't have to know that. Only you have to know that. That's knowledge you currently have. So you don't have to put it out there for anybody else. I was constantly trying to transition between business writing and scholarly writing. It was a challenge because I had been beat up so much about APA format, I couldn't let go of it. It was like my worst nightmare. However, it's amazing that with my current client that I've been with for 14 years, somehow I fell in the rabbit hole and I began teaching this class on business writing. I was like, but I'm a scholar, I'm an academic writer. I don't want to teach business writing. Well, this year alone, for the past 7 months, I have taught 6 two-day classes in business writing. And last month in Tampa, Matt, where you live, last month in Tampa, I taught a 2-day session at a conference on effective business writing. It's like I can't get away from it. So I'm betwixt and between. It's okay. It's okay. Just know when to say when. Sometimes it's easier than others. Another bridge that is undivided, once again. So yes, I've had to change hats several times. Sometimes I do in-text citations, reference lists. Other times I do footnotes and bibliographies, but it can be done. And I appreciate that I was able to share that with you and Dr. Hunter and my fellow colleagues. Thank you again for allowing me to share and to see how we all bridge that divide. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Eggleston, for sharing an insightful look at your experience as it relates to bridging the divide. At this time, we're going to allow questions from any of our attendees. You can either put your question in the chat box, which we'll be monitoring, or you can feel free to unmute your mic and you can ask any one of our panelists a question related to the topic, of course. So at this time, please feel free, and I would also monitor the chat.
So
Can you
while
hear
we're
me?
waiting to see if someone has questions, I'd like to ask Matt, what is your recommendation to get into the corporate environment, if that might be an option for anyone who's listening in?
That's a great question, and I would say there are a couple of different routes you can go down. The first being, just as you said, Margaret, just volunteering. As I mentioned, I started my corporate career, if you want to call it corporate career, out as again, doing training at a homeless shelter, which led to the next thing, which led to the next thing. But just getting that experience outside of academia, I think is always helpful. And I was making a little less at the homeless shelter than I was as a high school history teacher. If you could make less in 1998 than high school history teachers, but I thought it would lead to something better, which it eventually did.
Mhm. Awesome. I see we have a question in the chat from Sarah. Hold on, I lost my question. Give me one second.
Yeah, actually, do you
Yes,
mind,
Sarah.
Yvonne? Can I do that one? I love that question.
Yes. So Sarah's asking, in what ways do you foresee AI changing the landscape of professional training?
Yeah. So Sarah, if professional training, I like that. I won't talk too much about academic training, but professional training, a couple of things. So first off, one of the ways that I was using AI just this morning, I am working on a proposal for a department here in the state of Florida, and needed it turned around very quickly. So we have an internal chat, internal AI feature here at KPMG that is for our use only. It's based on all of our knowledge databases for the variety of different organizations we have. And I was able to put together this proposal before we started using it a year ago, to write out a proposal on how we would be doing training for this particular agency. It might have taken me 2 weeks to write, and I was able to get it done. Started it on, is today Wednesday? What is today? Tuesday? I started it on Monday. So I finished it this morning. I finished a proposal in a day and some change. So that's one way. And then the second way is content that we're building. Right now, we use a product for a lot of our videos. If you go out to the Florida Division of Emergency Management website, search around there, you will see videos we've created for them. We use a company called Beyond, BYOND, and Beyond has an AI feature. So I can create very quickly, I can create engaging training videos, short micro learning videos. Again, it might have taken me a couple of weeks to make a video. Before that feature was enabled in Beyond, I can make a Beyond video for my client in days, if not hours.
Awesome.
I'd like to chime in.
Oh, go ahead, sir.
Okay, so that's a very interesting question, Sarah. I use AI quite a bit. one of the first things that I use AI for is to come up with icebreakers related to my training content. Oh my goodness, it gives me such great icebreakers, but you really have to know what you're asking for, because for my writing class, I asked which presidents were known for their writing. And it actually gave me the name of someone who was not a president, but it justified it. It said, well, not really a president, but they wrote one of the president's biographies. I was like, okay, so you can't trust everything AI, but it gives me awesome icebreakers. So you can just put in, this is my training topic. I need some interesting icebreakers. And so that's one way. Another way is to actually create engaging exercises or activities for people that I'm training. And then I don't have to do all that work myself. I'm like, okay, so I need this group to be able to share X, Y, and Z that they experienced. How might I phrase that? In what ways might I ask them those questions? And an AI, and I'm just a chat GPT sort of user type person, but I've used it in Canvas and other types of AI, Gemini and other types of AI resources, but I use it all the time for my training. I do not use it in the development of the training itself, but I have asked it to give me resources. What other resources relate to this type of training? And then I can use those resources and go and look those up for myself. So just to chime in a little bit. Thank you.
That's a great suggestion. Now, anybody who has ever had Dr. Hunter as a teacher or as a professor will know that she grades your presentations with a time bell that she rings when you go over 2 minutes. And she also insists that every presentation have an interesting opening to it. And so I really could see using GPT to kind of ask, okay, how could I make an interesting opening activity for this? Matt, I have a background in corporate training, although I'm in academia now, and I do still do a lot of training in my position. And as a result, I get a lot of different ads through social media for different types of training. And what I've noticed lately are ads for, you can make your training in 2 minutes, just put your script in here and we're going to spit out, a fake robot that will train your people for you.
Yeah.
Do you have any concerns that that is going to, at some point in time, wholly replace the need for human trainers?
We talk about that a lot. Within advisory, so within the consulting group that I'm part of, we're HRD. And my group specifically is a training team, and there's about 200 of us, and we sit around and do a little bit of navel gazing every once in a while about are we going to have a job in 5 or 10 years? And I think we will. It's just going to shift and change, and it's shifted and changed. It's shifted and changed so much for me over the last 20 years. When I started, I was building content, and we started using PowerPoint to do our presentations, and that eventually changed into online and virtual classrooms, and it's changed and morphed now into using these tools that we have available. So I just think change is always going to be present in the industry, and it's really a matter of just staying on top of that change, not falling behind. If I had never learned how to create videos, I don't know that I would still be doing this. I might be back at a high school teaching about the Battle of Hastings, versus doing what I do. So I think it's just a matter of keeping on top of those changes, embracing the fact that there will be changes and those changes are going to happen, and then just figuring out what your next role and job is.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Matt and Margaret. We have 2 questions. One was from Michael, and it's for you, Dr. Ramirez. It said,
Yeah.
you mentioned instructional designers. What is the difference designing online learning and business versus higher education? Thank you. And then we
Yeah,
have another question after that from Sandra
Sure.
we can address.
Yeah, and Michael, I took a pass at answering that in the chat, but I'll elaborate. So one of the things is it really depends. There's no, it's not black and white like most things in the world aren't black and white, right? So some of our clients will have policies, whatever they happen to be. We do quite a bit of work for hospital organizations, and we find that with hospitals, nurses tend to have the I can't remember the agency that oversees nursing credentialing, American Nursing Association. Bad guess, maybe right. They have some very rigid policies on how we develop e-learning content. The one that comes to mind for me right off the bat is NASBA, National Association of State Boards of Accountancy, has CPE requirements. And if you look at those, some of the things that they want for an online training course like this, for example, is that every 15 minutes, first off, it would have to be exactly an hour for one CPE. Every 15 minutes, we would have to have a knowledge check. At the end, there would have to be a course assessment, potentially an evaluation. So there are requirements, and I think that's maybe where things just, I can't give you this is the blanket answer of this is one way and this is the other way, is because it depends on the content we're building and the client we're building it for. That's not kind of a cop-out answer, but hopefully that answers the question.
Yes, I think it does. Thank you so much. We have another question from Sandra. I think Sandra. Okay, yes, Sandra. She said, I experienced homelessness from the age of 14 until I was in my early 20s. My life experiences ultimately inspired me to establish my own transitional housing program that focused on teaching financial literacy. Awesome. Having only completed the 9th grade, I felt it was necessary to pursue higher education to truly help these people. I've been managing this program for more than 15 years and now focusing on promoting this established approach to personal development and independence. Does anyone have any recommendations on how to train and advance my program? Thank you so much, Sandra.
So I would like to share, again, one of the resources I mentioned, and that is SCORE. SCORE will provide you with free mentors for any type of business endeavor that you want to approach. I have used SCORE for years and years and years. I just recently became vice president of a nonprofit who does some of the same work that you do, Sandra. And the first thing I did was recommend that we get a SCORE mentor and that we pull from the SCORE resources. They have just tons of resources. Mm-hmm. And not only that, depending on what you need to pull together, you can get a team of mentors from SCORE. So what I would advise is that you check them out and request a specific mentor. You can look up mentors that are in your area or in the field that you would like to focus on. But please give SCORE a try. I highly recommend. You can't beat it for free resources, and they are experienced business professionals who have run conglomerates and all sorts of things. So check that out. Again, on that last slide, you will see a link to score.org, SCORE.org. I hope that will be helpful for you. And kudos on your passion and advancing that passion.
Thank you. May I ask, do they assist for-profits? Because I designed my program to be self-funding. I didn't want it to ever run out of money. And so I created a completely different model than what everybody's accustomed to. So it requires no grant funding. It requires 0 donations, and it runs effectively and has for the last 14 years. But the problem I run into, it's because I am not a not-for-profit. Nobody assists me when I need it. And so this has caused its own struggle. I thought I was doing something good by letting it fund itself, but apparently that's problematic.
Okay, that's a great question. And SCORE does not differentiate.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you so much. Do we have any other questions? Any other questions at this time? Okay, I just want to share with us one more time the resources that we have provided. And I just want to say thank you to our panelists for participating in this webinar. Each one has successfully bridged the divide and shared their experiences integrating theory and practice within academia and for the purpose of workforce and professional development. I also want to say a special thank you to our attendees. We look forward to seeing you at AAACE conference in Reno and encourage you to attend our commission's business and on business meeting on Wednesday the 30th or at 3 p.m. And also we are planning to have a 90-minute session, and we're not giving any details as yet. So it's a surprise, and you must come and be a part of that surprise. So we will not give any details, but it'll be a 90-minute surprise. So once again, I want to say thank you. We have the links for our panelists, their contact information and bios, and feel free to reach out to any one of them at any time, and they can provide further assistance. If you have additional questions, they can answer at that time. Also, we have provided some links. Dr. Eggleston spoke about the SCORE. We that link is provided for you, and we have an additional tool that we also encourage ONET online. And I know we didn't touch on it. Dr. Eggleston, would you like to touch on that for a minute?
Time permitting, I would. Thank you. We're still good on time?
We have like 5 more minutes we can go.
Okay. Okay. So ONET, one of the most valuable resources, another free resource. I believe in free. Okay. I started with free. Don't pay for anything you can get for free. Okay. So ONET, if you're considering any sort of job change or you're not sure where you can use your existing skills, including your academic knowledge and what have you, please go to ONET. There are various assessment tools there. You can put in the level of skills that you have. It will populate the types of jobs that are available to you. Some of us only know jobs by certain job titles, but ONET has job families. So depending on what skills you have, it will tell you what the field, what their fields and areas you can go into, what jobs are available to you. Not only that, with ONET, you can select a job. Let's say you want to be a principal at a high school. It will tell you, it has prediction factors in there to let you know how many principals of high schools are going to be needed within the next 5 to 10 years, where those locations are by city, by state, and how much the pay will be. I cannot express hardly enough the value of ONET. It is an awesome tool, one that I've used in my career development courses that I teach. And again, a free resource. It's in partnership with one of the universities and Department of Labor. So yeah, do free. Thanks, Yvonne. Appreciate you.
Yes, thank you all so much once again for attending this very powerful and insightful webinar. Our title once again is Bridging the Divide, an insightful discussion with panelists who successfully integrated theory and practice within academia and for the purpose of workforce training and professional development. So once again, just want to say thank you for attending this webinar. And we look forward to seeing each and every one of you, and invite a friend to AAACE in Reno. And remember that the purpose for Reno is AAACE. We're going there, and make sure that you attend our commission meeting and then our 90-minute surprise. So once again, thank you all. I'm going to stop the recording at this time.
Bye. Don't forget, bring extra money to the Reno casino for me. Okay. All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Matt and
Thank you.
Mitsu, Yvonne, thank you so much
Yeah, thank you very much. I
for
appreciate you
Thank you.
allowing
inviting
me
me.
to be here with you.